Hello, everyone. My name is Andrew Greene, and I'm going to be talking to you guys this evening about raising market turkeys. So some of the questions that were proposed to us by the 4-H staff was, determining what your goals are with regards to your market, well, either any of your market animals, but specifically, let's think about your market turkeys. So this is obviously a question that's going to be unique to each individual. So are you planning on raising market turkeys because you want to as a source of income? If that's the case, economics and how economical your production or operation is definitely going to be one of the primary influences on your operation. If you're looking to just be self-sufficient and the ability to grow your own food and eat it, then this is also another great goal to have and a great use of the market turkey project. And then, of course, there's always a few members that were much like myself that the goal was to win Champion Market Turkey at Pro Show. So as you can see, there is a lot of things that you could connect all three of those headings, but certainly the end goal is maybe a little bit different for each. The most important thing when we're raising any type of animal for market, especially our birds, is obviously what we're going to feed them and what we're going to be putting into them. So the poultry and turkey industry, probably compared to any of the other livestock and probably even humans, as far as nutrition, is probably studied the most. There is a lot of research and money invested into us understanding poultry and turkey diets. And ultimately, when it comes to deciding what we're going to be feeding our turkeys, the best option is by far commercial feed. So something that you'd be picking up at your local co-op or Purina or whatever brand supplies your area. And the reason why these are the best feeds to go with is that they are balanced and they are complete, and they're going to meet every nutritional need that your bird needs to have throughout its life cycle. But also when considering feeding our birds, we need to take into consideration other factors. So like access to feed. So how are we providing this feed? So what type of feeding system? Are we making that it's easy for the turkeys to get to? As well, we need to consider with how many turkeys we have that there is enough space that multiple turkeys can be eating or feeding at the same time. The typical turkey diet in a production system is that you start off with a starter crumb of some kind. So that's basically these pellets that you can see in this picture, just kind of pulverized. So they're just in smaller pieces that are a bit easier for the birds to eat. And normally you'd keep them on this starter crumb for about the first 4 weeks, and then transition them over about a week period to a grower pellet. And that would be similar to what we're seeing in these pictures. And then most people will keep them on that grower pellet for 3 to 4 months, or depending on what your market system is. It can be a little bit shorter. But ultimately, you want to finish on the finisher pellets, which you usually give them about a month and a half before market. So if we were going to be marketing off our birds at 6 months, probably around 4.5 months, I'd want to start transitioning to my finisher pellet diet. And the biggest difference between the finisher pellet and the grower is that they're a little bit lower in protein, but higher in energy. And then it's important that we don't forget about water. Whether it's food or water, you always want to make sure that your birds are provided with fresh, clean food and water. It does have a significant impact. If you allow your water to get stagnant, it's just going to harbor bacteria and can have a detrimental impact on your flock. And similarly, if we're going to allow our feed to spoil and get moldy, that's going to have a negative impact on our birds as well. It's important to also consider health while we're raising our birds. So our poults, which are essentially a turkey chick, they have a lot of health things we need to keep into consideration. The first 2 weeks, these birds are super susceptible to temperature change as well as other stressors. So I always recommend that you provide heat probably between 30 and 32 degrees Celsius for at least those first 2 weeks. During that time, as well, electrolytes in the water, when you first get the birds home, is never a bad idea, just to help deal with any stress. Birds that are stressed are more susceptible to disease and just overall don't grow as well. Whether it's our chicks or our older birds, hygiene is super important. We want to make sure that we're keeping our birds clean as well as the environment that they're living in. Speaking of environment, this is an area that obviously is a hot topic when we're talking about raising poultry and turkeys for production. So the commercial industry primarily goes with an indoor system where these birds are more intensively managed. But now there is a growing demand for these birds to be given outdoor access. And in most cases, our hobby farmers and our 4-Hers, our birds are more likely to get outdoor access. But to ensure that our birds are going to be meeting their production goals and meeting target weights, we need to compensate in some cases for their outdoor access. Birds that are going to be outdoors more are definitely going to have the ability to probably walk more and as a result burn more calories. So we want to ensure that we compensate for those losses by feeding them a bit more. So if we're looking at it from an economic standpoint, by allowing them outdoor access, we may actually have to be feeding them more. However, you could also look that by providing them with exercise, we're going to have better muscle expression in our birds, as well as better bone development as those muscles and bones are being challenged by the increased activity. And that's not to necessarily say that indoor birds can't have good exercise in their space. It's just when they're outdoors, they're more likely to kind of meet those exercise demands. And then whenever we're talking about any type of animal, but birds especially, we want to maintain a healthy flock. So we want to make sure that we try to purchase birds from disease-free flocks or healthy flocks to the best of our knowledge, as well as maintain good biosecurity on farms. So ensure that we're not, having dirty boots that go from one farm to the other that could bring disease into our birds, as well as if we're going to be moving birds around, that we're obeying proper quarantine protocols and stuff like that, just to not challenge our birds with a new disease. It's important to consider that while we're growing these birds, any little stressor, any disease, if they went a day without food, etc., because these birds are grown in such a short time frame, even one day off feed has a huge impact on our end result, both in necessarily weight or our ability to convert feed more efficiently. So every little step we can do to make sure that these birds are staying healthy and not being challenged by disease, temperature changes, etc., are super, super important. So in most cases with 4-H, we're compared to our other livestock, is we're actually going to have a group of birds that we're going to raise throughout a season. And that kind of gives us some advantages compared to the other animals. And I think in a lot of cases too, it allows us to we can pick essentially the best out of the batch that we have. Now, there may be quite a bit of uniformity in those birds, but you certainly want to try to select the one that has the most qualities you want. So when we're thinking about a show prospect for a market turkey, conformation is super important. It's not just simply who has the biggest turkey, which I think is a lot of people seem to think if you have the heaviest turkey, you have the best turkey, and therefore will get the most money, etc. But that's simply not the case. So you want to be picking a bird that has good muscle expression. You want them to have a deep breast, and you want it to be full all the way around. You want them to have long-bodied, or a term that's often used is a long keel, so that keel bone is long. And essentially, the point of having that is that you can have more meat spread out over a bigger area. You want them to be wide and carry the width over their shoulders right to the end of their tail, as well as you want a bird that isn't lame. You want a bird that can move well, because a bird that is struggling to move efficiently is going to have a harder time getting to the feeders, getting to the waterers, and just ultimately is not going to do well overall. You also want to take into consideration that you want to pick a bird that is free of disqualifications. So things that you want to look for include if they have a crooked keel bone, if they have bruised wings, stuff like that. Those things you definitely want to avoid. Another thing that isn't necessarily the most important, but I think from a show standpoint is important, that you want to make sure that you're picking a clean bird. So whether it's one that you're actually going to go clean yourself, or that you just keep them clean from the get-go. And conditioned, not necessarily just in their body condition and the amount of meat they have on them, but also condition is in the quality of feathers. Good quality feathers means a good quality bird and healthier overall. I also think when we're thinking of 4-H animals, an animal that is easier to handle is going to make a huge difference, especially if you're going to be taking it to a show and then have to show it as well. And bird that is easier to handle will tolerate that better and is less likely to hurt themselves kind of in transportation as well as at the event. So I just touched on market weights a bit. So over the last number of years at Pro Show, kind of the average weight or the kind of the higher end weights have been around 28 to 32 pounds. And in recent years, and I put it 20 weeks because in recent years, it has been changed because historically everyone would get their turkeys on the same day. So it'd be a pretty well uniform age group amongst everyone in the province. Obviously that's changed a bit, but for the most part, if you think 20 weeks, that's about 5 months, and we're getting weights around there. Obviously there's been years where there's some that might be 34, 35, and other years, you know, there's plenty of good turkeys that are at like 26 pounds as well. I just put that for a benchmark. And if we look at the Nova Scotia industry, currently toms in the commercial industry will be getting slaughtered between 18 and 21 weeks of anywhere from 33 to 45 pounds. And hens, they slaughter a little bit younger and are obviously smaller weight in that regard. But I think as things go forward and, you know, you can get, since you're responsible for getting your own turkeys, there is a bit a variation in that. This will just give you an idea of what kind of targets you want to meet. And that is all I had to talk about turkeys.